WWF Attitude is a game that I kind of remember playing, but I could be thinking of something completely different. I do remember renting this a few times, but again, my memory is kind of hazy. I also remember dropping this game immediately as soon as SmackDown came out, because that was much better. There is no story mode to this game, but there is a career mode. This is kind of cool, in theory, and it should be really fun to go through as either your favorite WWF wrestler or as a wrestler that has become a meme over the last few years. But it's not really all that great, and you really need to use your imagination to craft some story around this. Otherwise, it just feels like you're in a series of random matches that are eventually going to lead to something, but there's no real reason for your wrestlers to actually fight each other. You are chasing championships, but there's no real story to it. It's very strange. In the career mode, you start out at the bottom. You bring a wrestler up from really just doing house shows and dark matches to the WWF Championship. Unless you're in a tag team, then you go for the tag team championships. You don't really have control over which belt you go after, and things can get very repetitive. Especially if you happen to lose one match, then you go back to wrestling the guy that you had beaten previously. This does make sense, but it sort of feels a little bit like a fighting game at that point. It is really cool seeing your wrestlers start out at house show matches in front of a small crowd with very little production value going on, and then eventually working your way up to like Shotgun Saturday Night, Sunday Night Heat, and finally WWF Raw. At the time this game came out, SmackDown didn't exist, so you didn't go on to play that. But hey, it's kind of cool to, bring your character up, build up their reputation a little bit, and eventually move into some of the more high-profile matches, and eventually get on pay-per-view. Not having a story isn't the biggest deal, but it makes the game much more of just a grind to get through, as you're going through playing the same matches over and over again, and you're just doing the same thing. It got pretty old. I probably liked this a lot more when I was a kid because I just didn't have anything else going on, and I could spend a day just going through the career mode and wrestling the same characters until, I had work or I had something else going on, or maybe I had wrestling practice, maybe it was track, maybe, I don't know, a friend wanted to go to a movie and I could drop this game and go do that. Now as I'm older, playing through it, it's just kind of boring and it makes me want to go and do something else. Having a story would have kind of minimized that a little bit, but again, it's not the worst thing in the world since most of these games don't have stories. I think the biggest thing that annoys me about this gameplay is having to stop and check out your move list to just see what you can and can't do. It's really annoying. You could say that this plays like a fighting game, but that's pretty much how a lot of these wrestling games are going to play out. This one feels more like how I play a fighting game, where I have to stop to see what moves I can do, and then just try to pull those off. You have a very limited number of moves that you can do, and it really feels like you're just pressing the same buttons over and over again to essentially do the same 5 to 6 moves that you can do. It's really rather annoying, and it just adds to the repetitive nature of the game, where you're constantly playing the same characters over and over again, and you're doing the same moves over again. It gets rather repetitive. It did take me a while to get used to the controls in this, just because I really didn't get what the game wanted me to do, and then I had to, press pause, and that's when I saw the move list. I didn't remember this from when I played it 20 years ago, or more now, actually. 25 years ago at this point. Jesus Christ, I'm old. But yeah, I was worried when I checked the manual and there was no move list, so that was a little strange, and then I stumbled across it when I was pausing the game. I really don't like this. It's rather annoying. There are quite a few game modes in this. I really just stuck to the career mode because I thought that's where really the meat of the game was going to be. And it's fun to take your favorite wrestler and do stuff, like I mentioned when I was talking about the lack of a story in this game. Eventually, yeah, I just kind of wanted to put the game down and move on to anything else. Because the gameplay is fine, you can do stuff, but there's just no story and no reason, and yeah, without anything that I could find from the game, and just trying to use my own imagination to create some reason for why my wrestler is doing this stuff, I kind of just lost interest in what was going on. There are other game modes aside from career mode, but it's not anything out of the ordinary. It's essentially what you would expect from a wrestling game. The game does prevent you from just punching and kicking your way to victory, which is pretty great. It's forcing you to learn the controls and do the different moves. But yeah, it can be rather frustrating at times. The AI is very good at blocking and dodging, which gets rather annoying as you're just trying to, I don't know, hit a spine buster and the guy keeps blocking you somehow or dodging out of the way. And yeah, that makes me feel pretty stupid, or at least it did while I was playing it. And that kind of made me a little bit annoyed, but not in a funny way. You know, like how you do something and you just watch them do something ridiculous and you're like, oh, okay, that's the whole point of coming back to watch this game or play this game, is to see something ridiculous. And I didn't really get that from this game. WWF Attitude does have some pretty decent controls, but man, it just makes me wish I was playing SmackDown or really any of the other wrestling games that I've played so far. I was really thinking about just going back to either like Power Move Wrestling or WCW Mayhem while I was going through this. WWF Attitude looks okay for 1999. It isn't going to blow anyone away, but it looks pretty good. I like the way that WCW Mayhem looks a little bit more than this game, but I think WWF Attitude does a better job than Mayhem does with its entrances. Aside from that... Oh, and the crowd looks a lot better. Aside from that, I like just the in-ring action, how that looks on Mayhem than here on Attitude. The presentation looks really good for this game. The character models are what you should expect for the time, and their animations are pretty good. There are some issues that I can just chalk up to when the game was made, particularly the ring ropes, which just really look stiff, like they just made a whole bunch of lines on the screen, and there's not a lot of give to them, and yeah, it just sort of looks a little weird. They really don't move too much, and yeah, it's very strange when you watch your character get into the ring, and it's like they're moving in between just a fence or something like that. The entrances get a lot better as your character goes through the different shows in career mode. They get more production value, you get better entrances. It's just a lot better. The faces are kind of hilarious. They're just static images, which isn't a problem until the camera like zooms in on them during a submission move and they have like no expression on their face or just a blank expression. This is what you should expect from the late 90s, but still, it's pretty hilarious when you go through it. That is one of the parts of this game that I was like, this is great. This is absolutely amazing. Overall, this is just kind of a product of its time. The visuals are everything that you would expect from a 1999 video game. I didn't really have any huge problems with it, and at times I found it to be much funnier than what was probably intended. While I was playing this game and then writing out the blog post for this, I was trying to remember what I was thinking of, because I remember a completely different WWF Attitude than what I was playing. Because I remember something where you went through like an actual gauntlet of opponents. You started out at the bottom and you wrestled just everybody until you got to the WWF Championship, and then you were just basically defending the title after that. That's what I remember from a version of WWF Attitude, and it could very well be a version of the game that I'm just completely fabricating in my mind. But maybe that's just something else. Maybe I just haven't found that game on the PS1, if it even was on the PS1. It very well could have been something on the N64 that I remember playing with my friend Drew, because that's where I played a lot of my N64 games. Maybe I'll find it after a very long time. Maybe I won't. Maybe it's just a memory that I completely fabricated, and yeah, there's no basis for it in reality. I'm not really sure, but it's been kind of interesting trying to figure out what I remember this game being. So maybe it's still in the stack of games I have to play. Maybe it's not even on the PS1. We'll see as I keep going through all these video games. I think I like Mayhem and Power Move Pro Wrestling a little bit more than WWF Attitude. Parts of Attitude look much better than those other two games. Well, everything in Attitude looks better than Power Move Wrestling. But I think the control schemes are what's really kind of hurting this, and just the gameplay is not as good as those other two games. It was fun to go back and basically relearn how to play this. Around this time, I was really into wrestling, and playing as one of my favorite characters was pretty cool for back then. Nowadays, it's fun to pick up Steve Blackman and go for one of the championships, because I think he deserves it. The graphics are pretty good for the time, the animations for the moves are good, but there are some awkward moments which I found kind of hilarious, which most likely wasn't the intention behind it. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.